Denial, deceit.
Wow, it's Black History Month already? I haven't even finished recovering from all my celebrations for Kwanzaa. Now it's already Black History Month. Hi, this is Colin Flaherty. I'm the author of Don't Make the Black Kids Angry. Welcome to my podcast. As some of you may already know, here we expose the greatest lie of our generation, the hoax of black victimization. We document. We don't just say, we point to specific examples of how black violence is wildly out of proportion, and how so many reporters, so many public officials, so many community organizers are in such denial, deceit, and delusion about it, which makes it the greatest lie of our generation. So on this first day of Black History Month in the year of our Lord 2019, one of the first stories I read this morning was one of these like 10 people you have to learn about on Black History Month. It was a 29-year-old young lady who works for the NAACP. I think her job has something to do with she's in charge of the young person sector. So she goes around to colleges and rounds up warm bodies whenever they need people for a protest. And they always cast these relatively ordinary lives in such heroic terms. Like she learned she had a voice. She learned she could speak out. Her great transformative moment was in college while she was going to some big college. Somebody on the other side of the college, they scrawled a noose. They either carved it into a desk or they wrote it in a magic marker on a desk. We never found out who did that. We never found out what it meant. We never even found out if it was a real noose. But this was like the big moment in her life that made her want to dedicate her life to letting everybody know that black people are relentless victims of relentless white racism all the time, everywhere. That explains everything. And we're right in the middle of one of those storms right now, right? The storm of black victimization. You guys, I'm sure a lot of you guys have been following that story of Jussie Smollett, the big star of Empire. So many shows on TV now. I mean, this is a hit show that I've never seen. Maybe some of you guys have seen it, but I never have. But the third lead in the star is Jussie Smollett. He's a gay guy on the show, as he is in real life. And so the other day, Jussie was out at 2 a.m, 17 degree below weather in Chicago. And he says a couple of guys in Trump hats came up, poured bleach on him, beat him up, gave him a broken rib, and screamed, "This is MAGA country," 2 a.m. on the streets of Chicago. So today, so a lot of people were a little bit skeptical of whether this really happened or not. We don't know, all of us don't have to solve everything right away, right? There are 3 states of belief. We can believe it, we can not believe it, or we can be where I try to be until I've figured out once and for all in the middle by saying, well, you got to show me. It's like, show me. We've seen so many examples of hoaxes. My attitude is just show me. You haven't showed me yet. All you did is show me that, you showed up and were mildly non-cooperative with the cops. By the way, whatever else Chicago is or is not, Chicago has the greatest police news website in the country. It's called Second City Blog and Second City Cop Blog. And you guys really got to check that out. If you want to stay current on the Jussie Smollett news, they are just absolutely scorning this guy. They're scorning everything about it. This is where cops go to talk about their internal business. This is where they go to talk about what really happened behind these arrests and behind these stuff we see in the headlines that the other papers misreport. They don't want anything to do with this Jussie Smollett story. Another great place for news out of Chicago is a site called CWB Chicago, and it's really kind of it's a news site, kind of focuses around kind of a yuppie, gentrified neighborhood, lots and lots of black on white crime there. And they started this thing because I don't think anybody was paying attention to what was going on there. And so these are places that, both of these places are news sites that aren't afraid to look at what's happening and tell us what's going on. And so anyway, there's the story of Jussie. Nobody knows what really happened, but Jussie is doubling down. Today he went to, I think it was Teen Vogue, and he was telling everybody, like, hey, don't worry about me. I'm okay. But he wanted everybody to know that it's not, the story, of course, is bigger than him. It's way, way bigger than him. The story now is, well, this is happening to black people and gay people and, all the members of the alphabet people, LGBTQ. I don't even know what the letters are these days. It's happening to them every day. And so that's what he's going to dedicate his life to exposing that. So I'm just sitting there going, okay, I'm waiting for some examples, Jussie. I mean, if this is the first time you're hearing anything from good old Colin, I mean, if you go check out our videos or my articles or my books or other podcasts, we're all about examples here. We're all about specific things. We don't go like, well, that happens all the time. No, we go, no, it happened here, here, time, date, place. And it's a pattern. And we look at numbers, but we don't dwell on the numbers. We pretty much say, listen, if you don't know that black crime is wildly out of proportion, you are in denial in a very deep and dangerous way. And nothing, good old Colin says, is going to shake you out of it. But we do expose, we do illuminate the numbers with these examples that are way more powerful than just numbers. Hey, remember, numbers are not reality. Numbers are a representation of reality. Statistics are a representation of reality. The reality is what is happening actually makes up the statistics. And we're going to be getting a big dose of reality on this podcast today. Why don't we start off by breaking down Jussie's statement, how this is happening to, gay, black, LGBTQ, ABC people all over the country. Why don't we start off by remembering what Don Lemon said? Remember, Don Lemon, he's the CNN anchor. He's the one down with the cause all the time. Well, when Don Lemon was first starting out on CNN, when he first told the world that he was leading an alternative sexual lifestyle, I think the exact quote was something like, being gay is the worst thing that can happen to you in the black community, because gay people are not just scorned, not just marginalized. Gay people are victims of an enormous amount of black violence. Okay, when you read these stories about gay black people, what you learn is that, people are they're just brutalized routinely for no reason whatsoever other than they are gay. And it's not the kind of thing where, people are making a big deal about it. Lots and lots of those stories. And so we hear this guy, Jussie, trying to pretend that this stuff's happening every day.
Denial.
There are people in Trump hats roaming the country, stalking black people, hunting black people, beating black people, searching out gay black people, searching out famous gay black people, and this is happening every day. So, where's that happening? I mean, anybody who follows these podcasts or these channels, my stuff, they know that the opposite is happening every day. Gay black people are being brutalized every day. I mean, nobody's hiding it. Look at all the rap music. They don't really do it that much in rap music anymore. They don't really target and scorn and do the threatening hate stuff directed at gay people. But just because it's not happening in the studio, in the record studios, that doesn't mean it's not happening out in the streets where we're keeping it real with the fellas on the down low. And so people just say these things and they're totally unchallenged. I mean, Jussie Smollett gets up there and says, oh yeah, white people are doing this all the time to black people. I'm just the latest victim. Oh yeah. All right. There's not one cop in Chicago who believes what happened to you happened the way you said it did. there's a story out on the CWB Chicago where one of the people who lives in that building, in the building where he is staying, because they're shooting his TV show in Chicago. One of the neighbors goes, "Oh yeah, we have a lot of robberies out there on the street. There's a lot of bad stuff going on out there. That's why I believe them." Okay, so the robberies on the street in Chicago, there are white kids robbing people, black people on the streets of Chicago. Is that what you're saying, neighbor? Can you give me an example? No, the robberies happening on the streets of Chicago are not white people. That's a black thing. And if they happen near nice buildings, it's kids getting on the Chicago Transit Authority, whatever they call their thing. They hop on the trains. They come up to the Magnificent Mile. They rampage through the Magnificent Mile, sometimes in the hundreds. They beat up some tourists, beat up some shoppers, go into a store, steal a bunch of stuff, and run away. And the most the cops do is they show up on horses and they direct the kids to get back on the subway and go back to South Chicago. Ha, ha, ha. I don't know, I don't know why this is so hard for some of these genius reporters to figure out. There are no groups of white people roaming the streets of Chicago at 2 a.m. attacking black people. Now, did it happen to Jesse? That's what I'm saying. Like, I don't know what happened to Jesse, but I do know what happens in the other stuff in Chicago. And to say that he's part of a pattern is just one big fat lie. For him to say he's part of a pattern is one big fat lie. People have been reproducing some of his tweets lately, his tweets from the last few months, tweets about Trump, tweets about other people full of obscenities, vulgarities, threats, ridiculous accusations of white racism around every corner. This is a guy that is filled with vitriol. This is a guy whose imagination is white racism everywhere all the time directed at him. I mean, every one of these things we learn about him tells us, not that we don't believe him, but tells us that we need more and more proof if we are going to believe you. If we're going to believe this is something more than just another product of your feverish imagination. And the reason these things I think are important, these examples are important, is that they are the cases of Jussie coming out and telling us that he's a victim of part of a pattern of enormous levels of white violence on black people. I mean, this is not isolated. This is now something we see that is said in national television, national radio shows by nationally known people, national politicians, and it's unchallenged. Nobody says, "Hey, could you give me an example of that?" Or "What do you really mean by that?" I mean, we just saw this on NPR the other day. They were talking about these kids down, remember, it seems so long ago now, it was like 2 weeks ago, these kids down in Washington, D.C. Why were all the reporters so eager to jump on this fairy tale of white racism with Trump hats and smiling kids? I mean, that really shows what their predisposition is, right? I mean, if you go around, if all you have is a hammer, you're going to go around seeing everything looks like a nail. If you go around, if you walk out of your house and all you see, if you see a person 100 yards away and you go, "Hey, that looks like my old girlfriend from 6th grade. Well, what's that mean? I mean, you have a predisposition to find that old girlfriend from 6th grade. And if you're seeing the same thing all the time, no matter what it looks like, if you're converting it into one thing, well, you know what? That's what we do here. We expose people who do that, like these clowns from NPR.
Boys who are probably more interested in what their friends around them think of them in that moment than of their place in a larger society where black and white matter.
Look, if you're wearing a MAGA hat, you're a true believer. And so there's an expectation that you're acting on right, which is why we raise these broader questions about what's happening in these homes, what's happening in this school that allows what these young men were exhibiting to be seen as normative, right? This is not the problem with these youth. Youth act like youth. Teenagers act like teenagers. What are they learning from the adults in their lives that gives them the freedom to feel as though they can act this way?
Celeste, what's your take on this comment about the MAGA hat, the Make Make America Great Again hat and what it represents in this moment?
Yeah, I mean, the Make America Great Again hat is a provocation, right? I mean, whether you're a Trump supporter or not a Trump supporter, can we just accept that at this point, wearing that hat is going to be a provocation to other people? It says something. It makes a statement. It's meant to. And therefore, if what you're looking for is a civil, respectful conversation, that hat is never going to allow for that. There are some symbols that become so powerful that the individual's particular beliefs almost don't matter anymore. That symbol overweighs what it is that you yourself have experienced. So yes, the hat makes civil conversation impossible. I also want to mention, not in particular, because again, it is not the public's responsibility to make judgments about this kid, his parents, or his education, and anyone who's making threats against these children is in the wrong. But I think there is a good question to ask here about why a school would send these kids to be targets in a certain way. They're making these kids spokespeople for a political movement. And therefore, it's again disingenuous to say, why would you, target these kids? Well, the school put them in that position. And I think we have to ask ourselves, is that okay?
We also have to remember that children have been part of political movements.
Absolutely.
For the entire history of this country.
Yes.
I mean,
The reason NPR is important, the reason run-of-the-mill stuff on NPR is important, is because NPR and the New York Times, these are the two like Valhallas. These are the two promised lands for every single reporter in America. Every single reporter, whether they're working at a small town paper or a medium size, I know they're all shrinking, but wherever you work at one of these papers, everybody in the back of their mind knows, man, if I could just get pulled up by my forelock into heaven, I would land at NPR and the New York Times, where I could just do these real long stories about stuff nobody cares about, and everybody would think I was the greatest person in the world. That's what reporters think. And that's why when you listen to NPR, those are the idealized reporters. Those are the people that have, that are expressing like the heart and soul of what so many reporters believe.
Denial.
So now we get these guys just saying stuff about white kids deserve whatever they get if they wear these Trump hats. These are supposed to be fully functioning adults. What was on there? We had a national host. I think we had a college professor, another reporter on there. Is there ever... That's another thing about NPR, which reporters, it gives us also lots of insight into other reporters. Is there ever any contrast of opinion there? I mean, they give you the full gamut of opinion from A to B. That's it. I mean, the only thing they disagreed on was like, well, exactly how much white racism is there in this country? Well, there's a whole lot. The next person says, no, there's a really whole lot. And the next person after that goes, I don't know what you guys are talking about, because it's a really, really, really whole lot of racism all the time, everywhere. That explains everything in this country. Case closed. And everybody looks at him and goes, yeah, you're a genius. And so once NPR and all these reporters set the tone, it kind of goes round and around like a cat chasing its own tail. Who knows who starts it? Who knows where it ends? But we're on this like cycle of racially charged inflation now. Now we got Joe Biden. He was giving a speech to the Al Sharpton National Action Network. So Joe Biden decides he's going to give a heartfelt speech about white racism and how white people really suck to one of the biggest charlatans of any kind on the planet. Nobody thinks that's strange. Let's give Joe a listen.
America's been made better for all the struggles many of you in this room have endured and led. But we've learned in the last 2 years, it doesn't take much to awaken hate, to bring those folks out from under the rocks, that part of American society that's always been there, will always be there. They have been deliberately reawakened again, those forces. It's not an accident. They have been deliberately reawakened again. Unearthed by loose talk, by direct appeals to prejudice from the alt-right. And then something I never thought I would live to see again. having the President of the United States make a moral equivalence between those who were spreading the hate and those who were opposing it, saying there were, quote, very fine people on both sides. No presidents in the Civil War have ever uttered words like that. We have to challenge these forces of hate and stand up and simply say what the vast majority of Americans agree to. This is not our America. No, for real, not applaud. This is not who we are. We have a lot to root out, but most of all, there's systematic racism that most of us whites don't like to acknowledge even exists. We don't even consciously acknowledge it, but it's been built into every aspect of our system. One thing we know for certain, we've learned it over and over again through history, whether it's the Holocaust or the Civil Rights Movement, silence is complicity.
I mean, isn't that bizarre? Isn't it bizarre that all these Democratic candidates, they kind of always, they make their appearances to Al Sharpton for validation. This is the guy that created Tawana Brawley. This is the guy that unleashed a riot that killed people in the Jewish section of Brooklyn. This is the guy that is just the biggest. He's a perpetrator and a leader of the biggest hoax of our generation, time after time after time, even though Sean King's been giving him a big run for his money lately. But for all the stuff Biden says, for all the stuff Jussie Smollett says, we are left with, for all of their little fairy tales about stuff that's happening all the time, though they kind of forget to point it out, exactly what they're talking about. What we're left with is every day there's ridiculous levels of black violence, black on white violence, black on Asian, black on young, black on old, black on gay, black on straight, black on Indian, black on Amish, black on Eskimo, black on kitties, puppies, turtles, goldfish. And then we have people looking at us go, oh, Colin, I don't see any pattern on all that stuff you just said. No, no pattern. No, none at all, Colin. Well, there are patterns. We're going to talk about patterns. How about the pattern that we document here a lot, on my videos a lot? What about the pattern of a white kid who wants to buy a little pot from one of the fellas? How many times have we seen, usually a little more often, maybe it's a college kid. Hey, college kid's in his dorm with maybe his girlfriend, and he goes, hey, a couple of my boys are coming over to buy, we're going to smoke some weed. They're going to sell me some weed. Ends up robbing and murder. It ends up just like this story. Welcome to the first day of Black History Month, February 1st, 2019. And on this day of Black History Month, we do a reminder how many stories we do of black on white violence and murder during drug deals, or maybe a Craigslist sale to buy a pair of sneakers, or maybe a let go transaction to do a game, to buy a game station, buying or selling, it doesn't matter. The black person shows up to make a deal with the white person. There's a loss of life, loss of money, loss of property, just like this. 16-year-old white kid, football player, meets up to buy or sell, probably buy some pot. A couple of the fellas, they kill him and rob him. And then hope no one will notice. And if it's not pot, it's somebody meeting from an app to buy some sneakers, or somebody meeting to sell a motorcycle, or this or that. Bad business. If Jussie Smollett and Joe Biden and those geniuses on NPR can come up with one example of a white person ripping off a black person and killing a black person under similar circumstances, I wish you would let me know. And if you do find one, I'll show you 100 we've already documented that show the opposite.
Denial, deceit,
If Jussie Smollett wants to talk about sexual violence, wow, it's hard to even know where to start. In the last month, we've done a couple of stories about black women who are victims of sexual assault, rape. There's one story, and all these stories come from, the sources of these stories are all come from like black magazines that are very sympathetic to this. There was one in Root and a couple other ones. I think one's in Mademoiselle. And the stories all tell the same thing. It's like black women, young black women are being raped at epidemic levels. So one story that says 65% of black women are raped before they get to college and 90% do not report it. There are dozens of stories out there that talk about this enormous level of domestic violence and rape and non-reporting. The Huffington Post says a couple weeks ago, they did a story about it. The Huffington Post Black Voices section says black women are trained to protect the race at all costs. At these black colleges, here's the way it works. A woman wrote an article about this, about her experience of being raped at a black college. She goes to the cop or she goes to the school and she says, hey, this was nasty business. I was raped and beaten and all this stuff by a guy I thought I knew. Guy at the college. I think this was at Spelman College down in Atlanta. This was kind of a big case. Anyway, so all of a sudden, they pull the old, hey, were you wearing a short skirt? Hey, did you lead him on? Hey, did this really happen? Hey, are you making this up just to get attention? And then all the black leaders start coming in. The guy from the school, the community organizers, the ministers. They remind her. They say, listen. They say the same thing to her that Melissa Harris Perry said on her national TV show on MSNBC. They say black women don't report rape because they know that if they report their black men for raping them, then their men are going to be the victims of even more racial bad things. So everybody comes in, they start telling the sad story to the victim of rape. Why do you want to do this? Don't you know our men have a hard enough time as it is with the white racism? You're going to put him in jail. You're just compounding that problem. He won't do it again. This is SOP, standard operating procedure. But I have noticed lately a lot more women are coming out, black women are coming out and going, hey, I don't really want to be part of that cycle anymore. But the cycle persists. And for whatever level of black on black rape that there is, that black women are refusing to report and helping to convince the rest of us to be in denial, deceit, and delusion about. I mean, this level of black on white rape is black on white compared to white on black. It's like thousands to one. That number is like one of these numbers you can't even get a number on anymore. They stopped making that number. Thousands and thousands to one, black on white compared to white on black. And why don't we just do another story? This just happened. I think it was this just happened out of Houston. And let's pick up this story just in the last couple days. President Obama's favorite novelist, Toni Morrison, says she can't wait for the day when cops stop ignoring all this white on black rape and start arresting white people for and convicting white people for raping black women. Well, that day is not today, the first day of Black History Month, because today, interracial rape is a black thing.
Let it snow, let it snow, let it snow.
Rachel Bush is a ballroom dancer, a yoga instructor, an outdoor enthusiast, and now a title she wasn't planning on, a survivor.
It was the most horrific experience of my life.
4 weeks ago, Rachel says she met this man, Donovan Micah Jones, at a Montrose coffee shop.
He was well-dressed, soft-spoken.
She says they hung out with friends twice. The last time,
January 16, 2019. I'll never forget the date.
Rachel says they had a few drinks, and then he offered to let her crash on his couch. But she says that's not what happened.
He tried to rape me. And I said no. He just started attacking me and I went unconscious. He broke the cranial bone, the orbital bone, this bone, my palate.
Also, her cheekbones, jawbones, and several teeth all shattered.
Somebody called 911 and he did carry me outside onto the concrete.
She was in the hospital for a week. Jones was arrested and charged with aggravated assault. Rachel doesn't know if she was raped, but HPD says their special victims unit is investigating this as a sexual assault. Jones does have a criminal history, including armed robbery.
There is always going to be a wolf in sheep's clothing out there, and we as women need to do our research before we get entangled with the wrong person.
Sorry, Tony. No white on black rape today, but we still have 28 days left in Black History Month. Maybe you'll have some better luck in the next couple of weeks. So if Jesse Smollett wants to talk about sexual violence against his brothers and sisters around the country, there's a good place to start. But these are stories that we know actually happened, where we actually have real victims and real witnesses and real pictures. One of the stories we also do a lot around here, we like, this is another story about black history. Good Lord. Any white kid who ever went to a black school will agree with this. We've done a couple of podcasts on this if you look at our old podcasts. Any white kid who ever went to a black school will tell you that Black History Month is the most dangerous time to be in an environment that's already plenty dangerous. And the level of violence in chocolate schools is just off the charts. Sometimes it's directed at white kids. Sometimes it's directed at neighbors. A lot of times it's directed at teachers. Why don't we reproduce a story we did here just a couple days ago about the fellas, the lovely ladies acting up in school, directing their violence at teachers. We've done more stories about the tsunami of black violence in black schools more than anybody else, period. But we've rarely seen a story full of more denial, deceit, and delusion than we're going to see in this clip when we get to the story about why the fellas in this school up in Buffalo are attacking the teachers. So let's start in a city near Baltimore, then let's run up to Detroit, then let's go out to Buffalo to see why the white teachers are responsible when the black students attack them.
This is the booking photo of Geronimo Harding Jr., who faces a felony first-degree assault charge in addition to others, after police say he attacked his teacher at Loch Raven High School in Baltimore County. Police released new details about the violent encounter.
This student was having a conversation with a teacher. The student got upset during that conversation. The teacher was sitting down in a chair, and the student began to punch the teacher in the face. He knocked him right out of the chair and onto the floor and continued to punch him. Other teachers had to come in, students even came in, and the school resource officer had to respond, help break up that fight and restrain the student.
WJZ obtained video of Harding being led away from the school minutes after the attack, which left the veteran teacher with visible bruises and stitches. Harding turned 18 just 11 days before the incident. That means he's now charged as an adult. Sources say he was in the 9th grade.
Once we got a look at the injuries that the teacher sustained, they're quite serious injuries to his face, and so that caused us to go ahead and charge this student with a first-degree assault.
Court records show Harding was charged with being rogue and vagabond on his 18th birthday, a misdemeanor. Police declined to comment on any possible prior juvenile record. The teacher is recovering. We're told he did have to go to the hospital.
Yeah, guys, that teacher is expected to recover. Sources tell me she's in stable condition. But what happened here at Cody High School is absolutely cringeworthy. A young man attacking a woman old enough to be his grandmother. This is the aftermath of a vicious attack on a substitute teacher at Cody High School.
All of a sudden, all I hear is bang, bang, and I'm sitting there like, what happened? I was doing my work, And I just looked up and she was on the floor and she was like shaking and stuff, like her head was messed up.
Keontae Nelson says it all happened around 10:30 Thursday morning in a math class. The student walked in and began punching the woman, sending her to the hospital.
He ran up on the old lady, hit her, pushed her on the ground, and hit her again. That's not something that anybody should do, especially not to the old lady.
Brandon and Tisdale and 2 other students went after the boy as he ran out of the classroom. They were outraged he attacked the woman.
My friend Keontae and my man's John, we felt offended by it because that's somebody's grandmother. So we ran out the classroom and the boys started running. We chased them down.
Detroit Public Schools Community District says the student went after the teacher because she told administrators he brought drugs to school.
There should never be an excuse to hit somebody.
As students were being dismissed Thursday around 3:15, a 14-year-old freshman at McKinley High School, according to a teacher, was acting up in the hallway because his cell phone was taken away. The teacher, who asked that we not identify him by name or face, said he called the student's mother from his classroom phone, as he had done the day before, because of the student's bad behavior.
While I was talking to the mother, she asked to speak to her son. He talked to his mother very shortly, and then handed me back the phone, started cussing at me, yelling at me. As I was going to sit back into my desk chair, he body slammed me to the ground, and I'm not sure what I landed on, but my back was severely cut open.
Teachers Union President Phil Ramore showed us a picture of the teacher's injury. How are you feeling?
Not too good, very distraught. This is my career. This is what I love doing, teaching students, and you know, it's something that you never expect to happen in your career.
Buffalo police arrested the student at the school. He's charged with felony assault and harassment, which is a violation. Ramore says the student also told the teacher,
"Come to the block, we got guns."
The teacher has been at McKinley for several years and has noticed a change.
The culture of the school has drastically changed since Principal Barton was removed from the school, and the new culture of the school and new leadership of the school is creating a culture where it's teachers feel unsafe, students feel unsafe.
This is one of the first schools that we have ever had that the teachers actually took a vote of no confidence because of what was going on in that school.
Ramore says the district has not done anything about the current principal in place, and he says something must change.
We've brought you a few reports over the past 2 weeks about discipline and behavior problems at McKinley High School.
Now, a district parent group today says that we and others have portrayed the school unfairly, but it doesn't negate the fact that a freshman student was arrested for assaulting a teacher, and neighbors living near the school, they are fed up.
2 on Your Side's Claudine Ewing is here to tell us what a parent group had to say this morning. Claudine.
Scott and Mary Alice, a handful of members from the District Parent Coordinating Council held a press conference outside of McKinley High School today. They wanted to refute claims that the school has a disciplinary problem regarding the student regarding that student who slammed a teacher. Here's what the parent group had to say.
The adult in the situation was the one who acted inappropriately. He provoked the student. He did not follow the district policy on how to do an intervention with a child. He did not use restorative practices. He didn't do anything that would have helped de-escalate the situation.
Now, all last week, we reached out to the district and the principal of McKinley High School, but they could not discuss a personnel matter. The parents were also upset with images from neighbors that we received who have been fed up about the behavior of some of the students before and after school.
We got to do better. We can't continue to attack our boys and expect them to come up out of that and be peaceful and passive.
We don't want our black boys being attacked. We want the progress to be talked about. And more importantly, and most important, we want to work towards solutions for our kids.
Isn't that what we say around here all the time? I mean, everybody, especially white people and white teachers, they have to walk this razor's edge of respect and disrespect. And when a black student threatens you or he doesn't want to obey the rules or the law, that just means that you are disrespecting him. It's your fault. Because you did the one thing that in Buffalo or Detroit and Baltimore you just are not allowed to do forever, ever. You're just not allowed to make the black kids angry. How'd you like that last part where the parents come out and remind everybody it's not the fault of the fellas and the lovely ladies. It's the fault of the white teacher, in that case, who was provoking that 9th grader. We got to do better. A 9th grader. A lot of you guys might remember Marlon Newbern, great friend of this show, great friend of a lot of the stuff we've done around here over the last couple of years. Well, Marlon, he passed away last year, and we miss him every day. But Marlon was a prison psychologist. He was a court-appointed psychologist, and he took a little break during his career when, and he became a principal of a school for difficult kids. So Marlon got to see all this like really up close. And he talks about the kids like we just saw there, like that last group of parents at McKinley there, I think they called it. And Marlon would talk about how when you call a parent, when a white teacher would call the parent of a black kid, only one of two things happened 100% of the times. The parent would say, "Hey, listen, I dropped that kid off at school this morning. He's your problem now, not mine. Why are you bothering me?" Click. The second thing that would happen would be, "You're picking on my kid because he's black." Click. And the click would either mean I'm not going to waste my time going down there, or B, I am coming down there and I'm going to yell at everybody, at the first person I see to the last person I see, that you're picking on my angel because he's black. Go ahead, find a teacher. Ask them about that. You'll be surprised. Another thing I'd like to remember on this first day of Black History Month is the knockout game. Man, it's amazing how many people went to such great lengths, exhaustive lengths, to try to pretend that the knockout game was not a thing. And it might not be a thing depending on how you define it, right? I mean, if you define something very, 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 very narrowly, you can define anything out of existence. And so for the knockout game, we have people like Evan Osnos at the New Yorker magazine and other people that are going around going, "No, this never happened. This guy named Colin Flaherty, he just like made the whole thing up. He got Fox News to buy into it. He got Donald Trump to buy into it." And as proof positive of that, he called up a guy named Mike King, who's a professor of some small college in New York I never heard of. And Mike King goes, "Yeah, I looked all over. I looked high, I looked low. I couldn't find anybody playing the knockout game." And by this time, I had already written a book about it with video with hundreds and hundreds of examples of it. But the way people make a statement like that is they kind of like pretend that it's kind of like you're playing cribbage, right? It's like there's some international association of cribbage players that sets the rules. And if you don't fulfill every single rule of this cribbage society, then you're not really considered a cribbage player. Same way with the knockout game. It's like, well, they have to announce they're playing the knockout game. They have to hit you in one strike, and then they have to bring out a pencil and paper, and they have to put a blood pressure thing around your arm to see if you are indeed knocked out so they can keep the proper score, and we can enter that in the Knockout Hall of Fame statistical booth at this year's Knockout Hall of Fame convention in Las Vegas, Nevada. I mean, that's how you get, you kind of like define that out of existence. Well, I always had a different definition of the knockout game. Mine was a little bit wider. That is, if you go out and punch somebody for the hell of it, or if you go out and beat the hell out of somebody just for the hell of it, that's playing the knockout game. That's a black thing. It's a black on white thing, black on Asian thing. Black on old, young, gay, straight, kitties, puppies, turtles, goldfish. That's what it is. It's a game. I get a lot of pushback whenever I call it a game. "Colin, that's not a game. You quit calling it that. You're encouraging people." No, it's a game. They're laughing. They're having fun. That's what they do for fun. They go beat the piss out of somebody, and there's always laughing, laughing, laughing. It's on video now. You don't have the luxury to sit here and pretend like it's not happening. There are too many cases of it happening. I have a video of it. Go look for it on Facebook. It's like an hour long. All it is the knockout game, one after another. Boom, 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 boom. It's like hitting a speed bag. Boom, 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 boom. All over the country. Boom, 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 boom. You can't come back and say it's not happening. But people do. But it keeps happening. I mean, here we had a case. We actually did something. I did something yesterday I hardly ever do. I did this story twice. I did one in the morning in the first case of a woman. She was walking in Fort Worth. 3 of her kids. Fella came up, beat the hell out of her right in the middle of the day. Well, it turns out that wasn't the only person who had experienced this.
Broken bones. Women describe a pattern of violence at the hands of one man. Good evening. I'm John McKay.
And I'm Cynthia Izaguirre. We told you about the arrest of David Thomas after police say he randomly attacked a woman walking with her children in Fort Worth. Lauren Zakalik spoke to 2 of his previous victims who want to know how these attacks keep happening.
It hit me right here, just one punch.
The story of Collin County mom Jennifer Leedy.
And I mean, my nose is broken.
Who was sucker punched Sunday by a stranger in downtown Fort Worth has shocked people all over North Texas.
He just full fist.
This woman was shocked too, but not when she heard who the suspect was.
I knew it was him. I knew it.
Court records show 34-year-old David Earl Thomas has been accused over and over again of assaulting women as recently as a year ago. This is one of his previous victims. We aren't revealing her identity. She recalls when Thomas beat her so badly she landed in the hospital and he landed in prison.
He broke my nose, and I remember when he finally stopped punching me, he grabbed me by my hair and tried to pull me out of the passenger side of the car.
She's one of the many people wondering how and why his attacks keep happening.
Why is he not locked up, you know?
I also spoke to the woman who Thomas attacked here on Lancaster 1 year ago. She's now sharing her story and photos of her injuries in hopes that'll help keep him in jail and change the way we punish repeat offenders.
But I had, I want to say, 10 or so stitches on both sides of my face.
Georgia Chestnut says she's still traumatized after Thomas attacked her while she was walking her dog.
My biggest fear was just one day seeing this and that he did it again and that he hurt somebody even worse.
Thomas only served 90 days in her case. The DA admits his sentence should have been stiffer, calling it a mistake. They're now trying to get legislation passed so serial misdemeanor offenders can't revolve through the system.
It lowered my self-esteem all the way down. I was always watching my back.
It's been years since she last saw Thomas, but the effects are still there. She hopes no other woman has to endure what she and the others have.
Did you catch the part where he played that knockout game with somebody about a year ago? Hurt her really bad, had her down on the ground, was trying to gouge her eyes out. Did you catch? He was sentenced to 180 days, did 90. He was charged with a misdemeanor. This is Texas. This is where everybody's supposed to be law and order. This is where whenever this kind of stuff happens around the country, I always get a couple of dozen emails from people in Texas going, "Hey, Colin, we don't play that game in Texas." Oh, no. No. You try that in Texas, you're going to get shot. What happens in Texas all the damn time? And nobody's getting shot. So that's where we are on Black History Month. A celebration of what? Fake history? A celebration of how many people have been able to be in denial, deceit, and delusion about this incredible level of black dysfunction. The big buzzword now is, for every achievement a white person or an Asian person has, that is now part of their privilege. And so it's really just a question of norm, right? It's like, hey, is going to grade school, high school, and college without being arrested, without getting in jail, without becoming a drug addict, without stealing stuff, without clunking somebody on the head, without killing somebody, is that a norm? Is that just a white norm? Or is that actually privilege? Is the norm now that the black lifestyle? I mean, every single number, you guys with numbers love to talk about numbers. Every single number you want to throw at that lifestyle is just off the charts. from school attendance, school discipline, school performance? How about health? Boy, there was a huge story in Baltimore this week that Marilyn Mosby, remember she's the prosecutor down in Maryland? I guess they call her the state's prosecutor for the city of Baltimore. She's the one that stood up during one of the riots in Baltimore. I know it doesn't narrow it down that much, but she's the one who stood up and goes, "It's our turn." So she repeated a lie that just keeps being repeated and repeated and repeated, and nobody ever challenges. She said white people and black people spoke the same amount of pot, and that's why but black people are arrested way more often for it. That's why we're going to ask a judge to throw all these pot convictions out. We've done this before, so I'll try to make this the brief version of this. I cover this really heavily in my book, Don't Make the Black Kids Angry. When you hear people say that claim about white people and black people using the same amount of drugs, the same frequency, you go, well, how do you know that? Well, when you ask that question, the answer you get. The answer you get is, well, Colin, there's a lot of white kids on college students. They blow a lot of pot, Colin. How don't you know that? Okay, great. No, but where you get that is, you get that from the Census Department. The census every year, every 10 years, they not only ask you, the regular questions, but they take a couple of thousand people. I call it the super census. They go into your house and they ask you a lot of questions. They ask you questions about drug use. And when you ask the people in the census, it turns out white people and black people answer the questions about the same. It's called self-reporting. Well, self-reporting is itself the object of a lot of research. And all the research on self-reporting shows it is very unreliable, especially, they actually say this, especially for black people self-reporting drugs. Look at the articles in my books that I've cited about this, the research. There was a story down in Baltimore, Johns Hopkins. Had a bunch of people come in for blood pressure treatment. Well, they already had their blood. They took their blood sample, so they knew what was in their blood. And they looked and they said, people like 18% said, yeah, I've been using drugs. Well, it turned out to be like 3 times that many. It's a black thing. Same with cocaine. When you ask them a question, it says one thing, but when you test, the disparity gets enormous, and the Journal of Addictive Behavior says the number one indicator of disparity in self-reporting for drugs is whether the person is an African American. Bingo. And we can't get one reporter, we can't get one national figure just to look at some of these cockamamie numbers, cockamamie stories, challenge these cockamamie ideas and say, hey, where'd that come from? Jesse Smollett says, yeah, white people are roaming the country in packs looking for black gay people to beat up and put bleach on and put nooses around their neck. And Marilyn Mosby said, yeah, white people are smoking up a storm, using all kinds of drugs, but cops are letting them go and they're arresting black people. Where does that come from? Nobody's going to at least, let's say, really? Can you show me? Why do you say that? So that's where we are today at Black History Month. Just another year has gone by with another year of, God, so many newspapers, man, they're closing their doors. And it's part of it has got to be everybody knows what the game is, that the reporters are playing a game of telling us certain things, lying about other things, and not telling us about other things. They're just not challenging any black person on anything they say that has anything to do with this incredible level of black dysfunction in our country. And now we've got a whole month of that. We've got a whole month of, black people invented the space program. Black people, invented DNA. I don't even know what the hell they're saying this month. But on it goes. And I know that a lot more people, they're just seeing one thing in their own lives. They're learning how to read the newspaper and the crime stories. They're learning how to look up these people themselves. They're learning how much the newspapers do not want to tell us about patterns of crime and violence in their towns. And they're seeing the enormous difference between what they know to be true and what the reporters are saying is true. That number is, that amount of people that are seeing that is growing exponentially. I don't know when we're going to get to the tipping point where people are just going to say, listen, stop with the fairy tales. Last thing on this Jussie Smollett thing, they asked Trump about it. Trump said, what's the worst thing that could ever happen to somebody? I'm really sorry it happened to him. So Trump, I don't know if Trump bought into his story, hook, line, and sinker, but for sure somebody whispered to him, listen, if somebody asks you about this, you better buy into that little fairy tale, hook, line, and sinker. So all of a sudden, Trump's meeting with reporters from the New York Times in his office. He's going around telling everybody Jussie Smollett is some kind of victim of, white racism and people wearing Trump caps. Well, those aren't good signs. They're just signs of how strong this denial, deceit, and delusion really is in some circles. But for every little story that we recognize as being part of that, that's more people that are they're just not going to go back. They're just not going to unsee these stories. They're not going to unhear this podcast. They're going to know there's something really weird. They're going to know that they're somebody's trying to mix them in to the greatest lie of our generation. And a lot of people just don't want to be a part of that lie anymore. We don't even know what the consequences will be when we stop believing and promulgating that lie of relentless white racism and relentless black victimization. But we pretty much know what will happen at first if that lie starts to diminish. We know that's going to make a lot of black kids angry. Catch you next time.